Hi, YouTube, Mr. Mags here. Pokemon abilities were introduced in the Generation 3 games of Pokemon, and I genuinely believe that it was one of the most important decisions that Game Freak ever made. There's a lot of abilities that make Pokemon just absolutely incredible, and there's some others that are actively detrimental to the Pokemon. But I wanted to focus on the ones that are actually really good today. I've always been really fascinated by Pokemon that have several just really, really good abilities to the point where it can be kind of hard to determine which one you actually want to go with when you're using that Pokemon. So today I wanted to dig in and try to determine which Pokemon I believe have the best set of abilities. So let's start with the criteria for how I ranked these. So I decided to only go with Pokemon with three ability options in a single form. There are several Pokemon that have two fantastic abilities. There's some Pokemon that have a different form that has a really good ability when they have two or three abilities, and between different forms, they have at least three really good abilities. I'm deciding to go with three just because, like I said, I'm just fascinated by the idea of the player having to choose which ability to use. And I think, the harder that decision, you know, the harder that decision, the more interesting that is. So that's why I'm going with three abilities. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of Pokemon that have two really good abilities. Um, so if you feel like I missed anything, that might be why, because I'm just ignoring anybody that doesn't have three abilities. I'll be judging them based on how good all three ability options are, with bonus points if all three are equally viable on that Pokemon. So I'll be primarily judging them objectively based on how good the abilities are, and then in order to make it into what I'm considering the top five, you have to be exceptionally good specifically on that Pokemon. There's some Pokemon that have three really, really good abilities. They just don't really synergize super well with that Pokemon's typing or the moveset or just what the Pokemon wants to do. Even though they have really good abilities, that may just make it so that they don't really want to use, two of them. Uh, so Next will be usefulness in both competitive battling and casual playthroughs is considered. So there are certain abilities that are really good during an actual playthrough, and others are really only good in competitive, both doubles and singles and just, everything in between. I'm kind of incorporating all of that here. And to kind of go off that, just know that I never claim to be any kind of, competitive battling master or anything. I dabble here and there in the competitive scene, but I'm not like a expert or anything. There very well might be an ability with a niche use that I just completely missed or just wasn't really aware of how it was used in like, super niche yet very competitively viable ways. And there might be something in a more casual playthrough that could actually, has some niche that I wasn't aware of. So again, if I missed anything, please let me know down below. And kind of going off that, this is just my own personal subjective opinion. Um, there's certain abilities that I think are very, very good based on personal use. There's ones that are just, at a glance, I feel like that's really good on that Pokemon. But if any of you feel like any of my rankings either shouldn't be there or there's any Pokemon I forgot about, please let me know down below. I would, really, really like to have a discussion. And, if I get enough suggestions for Pokemon that you think should have been on the list, maybe I can make another one of these. But as of right now, um, I'm just going off of Pokemon that I think have three really, really good abilities. And ideally, it'll be kind of hard to choose between which ability you want to use when actually using this Pokemon. So, first off, we have honorable mentions. I ended up having 12 different Pokemon that didn't quite make it into the top five. Most of these were actually kind of fighting for spots in there, but these are all 12 Pokemon that have three really good abilities that there's just something about one or two of the abilities that don't quite synergize in the way I would like. So let's get right into it with the first one being Porygon Z. So his abilities are adaptability, which boosts the power of stab moves. So in his case, that'd be normal, unless he's terastallizing, for example. Download, it boosts the attack or special attack depending on the opponent's lowest defensive stat. So if you're going up against an Aggron who has massive defense, his special attack would actually be boosted to better hit him on his weaker side. And then Analytic, which boosts damage of moves when used last in the turn. And adaptability is fantastic. It is objectively one of the best abilities. Like being able to, you know, use the moves you're going to be using anyway with your stab attacks, being able to use those and hit even harder, amazing. Especially with Porygon Z specifically, who when terastallizes, he's able to basically hit with Terra Blast and get that adaptability boost regardless of what Terra type he uses. I think that's very cool. Download and Analytic, however, don't quite synergize as well as I would like them to. In theory, Download giving you an extra special attack boost could be really good. However, about half the time it's kind of doing nothing for you since Porygon Z never wants its attack to go up. There might be niche cases here and there where having higher attack could be nice, but generally speaking, every single Porygon Z set is going to be an all-out special attacker. So when half of the time your ability does nothing for you, it's not really, it's not the best. Same with Analytic. There are definitely some niche cases where, maybe Porygon Z would be going last in like a trick room, or maybe you plan on it going last if your opponent sets up Tailwind, or you just know they're faster somehow. But more often than not, you're going to be investing heavily in Porygon Z's special attack and speed. So yeah, it's almost never going to be moving last in any given turn. So once again, Analytic almost never actually benefits this Pokemon. Even though these are three fantastic abilities on Porygon Z, they're just not synergizing the way I would like. So that's just kind of an example of three really good abilities that don't quite synergize together, even though I think Porygon Z is a great Pokemon. It definitely uses adaptability very well. The other two on it aren't the best. Next, we have Stoutland, who also has three just fantastic abilities. Intimidate, objectively, probably the best ability in the entire game. With Intimidate, like I said, with what lowers the attack of all opponents when it is switched in. Stuff like Incineroar is just infamous for being able to utilize this ability, really well and just terrorizing teams because of it. Sand Rush doubles your speed stat when sand is active. Pretty good considering just how prevalent weather is. And then Scrappy allows normal and fighting type moves to hit ghost types. And in more recent games, it also blocks Intimidate, which, like I said, since Intimidate is running rampant in the current meta, that's pretty good. And I could definitely hear an argument to go between, picking between Intimidate and Scrappy. I could very easily hear situations like if you want to give it a choice band to just spam double edges and at least hit everything for 4 damage. Like, yeah, you're hitting steel and rock types are not very effective, but if they try to throw in a Spiritomb or some other ghost type, you're not going to be scared of it because you can still at least hit it with with the move you select. So yeah, on all the while not getting your attack lowered by Intimidate. That's pretty good. However, Sandrush, although it is nice to be able to include this, pretty versatile normal type on a sand team, the problem with Sand Rush is that unlike Sand Veil, where that boosts your evasion while in sand and also makes you immune to the sand damage, Sand Rush for some reason doesn't nullify sand damage. I don't really know why. I think this is the only case where a Sand Rush Pokemon isn't already Ground Rock or Steel anyway, but I still feel like you should have done it like Sandvale with Cacturn, just not taking sand damage when it has that ability. I think Sand Rush, I really hope they do include that in the future, because if they do, this would definitely be way higher up in the list. Now, granted, I didn't say this up top, but the honorable mentions aren't necessarily in any specific order. But if Sand Rush did nullify sand damage, there's a chance this could be in the running for top 5. Next, a kind of silly one, but I think these are still three abilities that should be mentioned, especially on a Pokemon that is, you know, not thought about as being great anyway. These abilities do at least help it actually, potentially get stuff done. So we have the ability Simple, which doubles any stat changes, including both, you know, positive and negative stat changes. Unaware, which ignores stat changes completely when attacking or being attacked. So if your opponent has high attack when it's attacking you, it's as if it has neutral attack. Or if they've boosted their defense, you ignore that boosted defense. I think it also ignores defense lowers. I could be wrong about that. But regardless, that's you're always hitting and getting hit neutrally. That's great. And then Moody is a very funny one, but again, on certain sets can be very fun. Moody raises a random stat by two stages and lowers a different stat by one stage every single turn. So if you send B-Barrel out and then immediately use Protect on the first turn, it gets, two random stats up and one stat down. Over time, you can, if it sits out in the field for a while, it can become quite a monster. So I just find it very cool that this Pokemon has three different abilities that are kind of able to modify stats in very different ways. I really like that. It definitely was never really vying for those top spots just because Moody can be very unreliable. Simple, yes, it's good to get up swords, dances, or curses and just get massive boosts off of each attack. But again, if they send out an Intimidator, your attack goes down by two. If they use, certain moves that lower your stats, those lowers, they get you get lowered even more. So it's really not the best ability to have. But Unaware is another one of those abilities that kind of like Intimidate is just objectively one of the best abilities in the whole game. So yeah, I wanted to include it here. Another pretty silly one, Happiny. Ironically, I think Happiny actually has a better ability spread than Blissey does. Chansey and Blissey, instead of Friend Guard, they have Healer. And Healer's not awful, it's just not as good as Healer, which I'll get to in just a second. But on top of that, they also have Natural Cure, which cures all status conditions when you switch out. Race, which doubles the chance of additional effects of moves occurring. So if you use Thunderbolt, there's an increased chance of it paralyzing. If you use Headbutt, there's an increased chance of it flinching, etc. And then Friend Guard reduces damage all allies take from opponents' moves. I think it's a 25% damage reduction. So especially if you're in like a little cup league or that kind of thing, and you're playing doubles in that league, having a Pokemon with Friend Guard could be very useful. Both Serene Grace and Natural Cure are both very good on Blissey. I've seen both be very viable. It does work a lot better on Blissey, who can learn, Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt, and just like I think Water Pulse and like just a bunch of other moves that actually have secondary effects. Whereas Happiny doesn't learn many. I know it gets Shadow Ball, it'll probably get Headbutt in some way. There might be a few others, but definitely not just the massive spread that Blissey has. So it's a really good ability. It's just not the best on Happiny. Next is Suian Gudra. We have Sap Sipper, which raises attack when hit with a grass move instead of taking damage, being just immune to any move, any type is very good. Shell Armor just prevents critical hits. That can be very good when you're trying to set up with Iron Defense or whatever. And then Gooey lowers the opponent's speed upon contact. So every time they hit you with a direct damaging move that deals contact damage, they will they will have their speed lowered. That's pretty good, especially since Hisuian Gudra is even slower than regular Gudra. There's a decent chance that after one GUI um, drop, you might be outspeeding them. You might not be since Hisuian Gudra is pretty slow, but especially if they like a multi-hit attack or if you're like just on the cusp of outspeeding them, if you give it like moderate speed investment, Yeah, I think it could work, especially since they're now extremely bulky on the defensive and special defensive side. Just having the chance to lower their speed could be very good. Um, yeah, the only problem with actually I have a couple of issues with all of these on Sugi and Gudra. Um, like I said, with GUI, it only really works when you get hit, and like ideally you never want to get hit. Um, so yeah, it only works on contact moves, so it's not the most beneficial ability for you. Sap Sipper, I said it's good to have an immunity to any type, especially when, you know, Sap Sipper would make you immune to stuff like Leech Seed and Spore. That's very good. But outside of like those two and maybe Stun Spore and a couple other niche moves, every other grass move is already gonna be quad resisted by it. So and like outside of body press, I don't really maybe like Earthquake or a tech power whip or something weird like that, maybe Dragon Tail. There's a couple of decent physical moves it can run, but Hisui and Gudra is generally a special attacker, so you're not really going to care as much about your attack being raised. And it would also be more beneficial if you were immune to a type that you were either took neutral damage to or outright um, weak to. And then shell armor, it's good. Like I said, it's good if you're trying to set up with iron defenses or have like an assault vest set and just want to sit there and just, tank hits and deal damage. Not getting hit by critical hits is good, but I do feel like there are other just generally better abilities. Next, we have just a block of three fighting types that I think have very good ability that just don't quite push it over the edge. Pangoro first here. We have Iron Fist, increases the base power of punching moves by 20%. Mold Breaker, that's one of those abilities, kind of like Scrappy and Intimidate, which you'll see several times throughout this list, that is, I think, very, very good. It ignores the target's abilities when attacking. So the opponent has sturdy or multi-scale or some other ability like that. It just completely ignores it, which is pretty good. And then once again, Scrappy. Scrappy isn't as good on Pangoro specifically since it is part dark, so it already has something to hit ghost types with. It's not as necessary on it as it is something with Stoutland. Stoutland can get coverage moves like Crunch and stuff, but um, I feel like is just overall better on a normal type than it is on a fighting type, especially a fighting type um that is part dark as well. So, it's a good ability to have, especially since it does block Intimidate. If it didn't block Intimidate, I don't even think Pangoro would be on this list, but since it does, I think it deserves to be here. Um, if Iron Fist boosted punching moves by even 30%, ideally 50% to make it in line with sharpness and strong jaw. That would be ideal. That would be phenomenal. I don't know why they haven't buffed that over the years, but it's still only 20%. Um, the way it is right now, it's okay. Like it's good, but it's not like phenomenal. Especially since I guess hammer arm, I think there's drain punch, bullet punch, ice punch. There's a decent amount of punching moves, but them only being boosted by 20%, I don't know. It doesn't quite push it into the top five. Next up, Hariyama with thick fat, where you take half damage from fire and ice moves. It's good just to, take reduced damage, especially when stuff like Heat Wave and Blizzard is everywhere in the current meta. Guts, that increases your attack when affected by a status condition, so poison, burn, etc., which is very good when you're burned. So that way, instead of losing attack power, you actually gain attack power. And then Sheer Force, another one of just the best abilities in the whole game. It increases base power of moves with secondary effects, but removes those effects. So if you try to hit someone with Rock Slide, that the base power of Rock Slide will be boosted by 30%, which again, I think Iron Fist should have also been boosted to 30, but whatever, or higher. Uh, and now instead of 75, it is like approximately 97 to 98, depending on how they round it. And but instead of potentially flinching, it now no longer flinches. So you have a trade-off there, but you still get that increased attack damage. And those are three just fantastic abilities. I've seen both Thick Fat and Guts be used on various sets. Thick Fat is more so on Assault Vest sets, and then Guts is obviously like Flame Orb, or I guess Hexagore, but it's not really as used as much nowadays. But regardless, Guts will be good to have in case, they do want to try to burn you or set up toxic spikes or something. You can come in and then immediately start attacking very strongly. But Sheer Force, it's really, really good. It's just not amazing on Hariyama. There's really not that many good fighting moves that have secondary effects um, that can be removed for sheer force. I'm pretty sure all moves that have a high critical hit chance cannot be impacted by sheer force. So even like cross chop can't be, which I think Hariyama can learn. I'm not actually sure about that. But Dynamic Punch probably could, although, that has super low accuracy. Low Sweep could, but that doesn't make it like super strong. Um, like there's basically no fighting move it can learn that would make it stronger and more reliable than close combat already is. And, aside of Rock Slide and I guess, the elemental punches, there aren't that many other good moves that it can learn that would be impacted by sheer force. So, although these are three individually really good abilities, because it really only is picking between Thick Fat and Guts, and honestly, most of the time it's going to pick Guts, I can't really justify putting it much higher. Lastly, in the fighting block, we have Conkeldurr, which actually has three of the abilities I just mentioned with Guts, Sheer Force, and Iron Fist. Now, I think Conkeldurr can probably make slightly better use of all of these. Um, it- I think it can learn like one or two other moves that can be boosted by Sheer Force. Still not many fighting moves that can actually be that can really utilize it. Um, it actually has priority Mach Punch, which I don't think Pangoro or Hariyama can have. Um, so yeah, having priority Iron Fist that could be, be having Mach Punch that can be boosted by Iron Fist is very, very good. So I think it still probably is better to pick between just Guts or Iron Fist. There might be niches here and there where Sheer Force can work, but generally speaking, you're going to be choosing between Guts and Iron Fist. So those are three very good abilities. It's objectively great, but on Conkeldurr, Sheer Force isn't really helping it as much as I feel it could be. Next up, for a draft, we have Cudchew, which makes it where berry effects will activate again the turn after consumption. And that's really fun. I don't really know how good it could be on Farigiraf. Like maybe if you activate a Pitaya Berry, you can get actually two different special attack boosts. Obviously, you can get a bunch back from Citrus Berry, where it basically activates twice. So it is a wish user, so it doesn't necessarily need Citrus Berry um, in order to sustain itself. But it's still kind of, still is a fun option to have. Armor Tail, one of the best abilities in this current meta, where Fake Out and Priority with Prankster is everywhere since it blocks all priority moves. Amazing on, especially when facing stuff like Whimsicott, where it's trying to, you know, put you to or paralyze you with Stun Spore, taunt you, so you can't use any like Shriek Room or any other status or yeah, status move like that. So being able just to block that entirely is very good. And kind of in a similar vein, we have Sap Sipper again. And since, like I said, Spore moves and Leech Seed and a bunch of grass moves are pretty prevalent, it's pretty good to have Sap Sipper just as an option. If anything, I feel like Armor Tail and Sap Sipper kind of like, this might sound a little weird, but I feel like the threat of it having either of those abilities honestly kind of makes Cudchew better, because it probably going to be a thing where they're never going to want to attack for a draft with any with any grass moves or with any priority moves because they assume it will have one of those abilities. So if you want to do something kind of funky with Cudshoe, you could probably get away with it no problem. So I would like to kind of try and experiment with that at some point in the future, maybe, but at least in my head that could work. But regardless, Armor Tail and Sap Sipper are both very good. Sap Sipper is even better on for a draft than I feel it would be on Sui and Gudra, since I just feel like Body Slam is a very powerful move in this current meta, so it's probably fine to tech that on it. Although Hyper Voice is probably more useful since it's a spread move, but regardless, I think overall the three abilities synergize very well with Furry Giraffe, but Cudshoe is good, but it's not like so amazing that it puts it in the top five or anything. Next, Miltank. Again, we have three abilities we've talked about already: Thick, Fat, Scrappy, and Sap Sipper. These are three just very, very good abilities. It's very nice to, once again, not to take a lot of damage from stuff like Blizzard and Heat Wave, um, to not be hit with Spore or Leech Seed. And then if you are going up against a ghost type, them at least being a little afraid that you might hit it with a normal move. It's useful to have all these abilities. It's useful to kind of play mind games with your opponent about what ability you even have. And again, with Scrappy blocking Intimidate, I know Miltank doesn't have the best like output necessarily, but it's at least not going down because you have this ability. So that's cool. It doesn't This is one of the situations where these three abilities are good, but they don't really make the Pokemon amazing. Miltank is a lot faster and a lot bulkier than you might think it would be, but outside of Whitney's Miltank specifically, Miltank isn't really going to do a whole lot. It is definitely, with Scrappy, would definitely be very useful in a playthrough just to, just continuously hit down any ghost types you come across. But as far as competitive battling, it's not the best ever. Next, Dreadnought, we have Strong Jaw, which increases the base power of all biting moves. And I believe that is a 50% increase as opposed to Iron Fist's 20. We have Shell Armor again, which once again prevents critical hits. Pretty solid when you're trying to set up Shell Smash, and you're pretty much guaranteed to get at least, one up. And then Swift Swim, which doubles speed when Rain is active. Rain is very good with this water type where it already boosts its water type moves, and it being able to increase its speed in Rain is very solid. So all three of these are very good. I think Shell Armor and Strong Jaw work the best when you have when you're running a Shell Smash set. So with Shell Armor, sorry, you're there's a better chance of you getting off one Shell Smash, since you can't be critically hit, and then Strong Jaw makes your moves that much stronger once you have that boost. So these are all pretty good abilities, but I still feel like they don't quite elevate Dreadnought into the top five for me. And last of the honorable mentions, we have Grafai, who has Unburden, which doubles your speed after your item is used or lost. So if you're holding a berry or you fling something, or if it's lost by knockoff or tricked off of you, your speed is doubled. Poison Touch. There's a chance to poison the opponent whenever you make contact with them. So if you use Poison Jab, there's an even higher chance of poisoning, as well as like if you're using knockoff or Super Fang or U-turn, just there's a lot of moves that can use that deal contact, so that's good. And then Prankster makes all non-damaging moves have priority. I mentioned this a little earlier when talking about Armor Tail. Grafia can learn a good amount of those status moves. Like you can learn Taunt, you can learn Parting Shot, Toxic, obviously. There's a couple of others that could, that are pretty good on it. So yeah, I've seen a lot of different uses for Prankster and Poison Touch. Unburden is another one of those abilities that it's very, very good. It's hindered by a couple of things. One, it doesn't work if you switch out and then switch back in. you have to lose the item while it is on the field, otherwise the speed boost is gone. And also, Grafii is already so fast that it doesn't really need Unburden. If you're worried about speed control, or if you're worried about those speed tiers, you should probably be running Prankster anyway. So yeah, I feel like the other two abilities are just work a lot better on this Pokemon. Even though Unburden is great on certain other Pokemon, is not amazing on your Fire. Okay, so into the top five here. And once again, if at any point you feel like I am just way off base with any of the honorable mentions or any of the ones that are in the top five, if you feel like ones that I mentioned should have been in the top five, or I just completely forgot about something that should have been here, please let me know. So, first off, we have Gumshoes with Strong Jaw. As I mentioned before, it increases the base power of all biting moves, and Gumshoes learns a good amount of fighting moves. Stakeout, which doubles the damage of moves against a target that switched in this turn. That's really, really good, especially I feel like switching is just generally more common in single players in single in like 1v1 fights. Um, I know in like regular playthroughs, opponents don't really switch out all that much, but I still feel like, especially if you are doing a single battle format, it can be pretty good. And adaptability, once again, boosts the power of all stab moves. So if you just give it a choice band and let it run wild with double edges, it'll hit pretty much anything with just a ton of damage. So I think all three of these are about equally viable. I do think adaptability is overall probably slightly better. The boost that something like Hyper Fang would get from Strongjaw would not put it, I don't think would put it above the damage that Double Edge could do with the adaptability boost. And then Stakeout, if you're able to make it work, it can really work. But I feel like Gumshoos is a Pokemon that people wouldn't really want to switch out in front of. Like it's really slow. So I feel like most Pokemon would feel like they have an advantage against it. So maybe it's not like the best on this Pokemon specifically, but regardless, I think it's still a very good ability. And on top of the other two also being very good and synergizing with it very well. Um, like I said, I feel like adaptability is probably the best here, but Strongjaw, since it learns Psychic Fangs, the Elemental Fangs, Hyper Fang, um, Crunch, obviously, like there's a lot of moves it can learn that get boosted by it. I think any one of these could be viable on it, but again, it doesn't make the Pokemon itself just amazing. That's why it's only number five, as opposed to being a little higher. Number four, another stakeout user, actually, we have Mabostiff with Intimidate. Like I said, one of the best abilities in the game, if not the best. Guard Dog, which is a unique ability to it. There was actually Pokemon in the DLC, Okidagi, which got it also. Um, but it's a pretty solid ability. It cannot be forced out, and your attack is raised by Intimidate instead of lowered. So it's like Scrappy, except it's low, it's your attack is raised instead of just neutralized. So that's pretty good. In Generation 8, I believe there were a lot of different abilities that were kind of retrofitted to make it where Intimidate is nullified. I know Own Tempo, Inner Focus, I believe, Scrappy. There's a couple of others, but Guard Dog is kind of a upgraded version of those. On top of having your attack raised by Intimidate, you also can't be forced out by Roar, Dragon Tail, etc. So that's pretty good. And then again, Stakeout is just a very, very good ability. I do feel like Stakeout is better on the Bostiff since it's a lot faster. It hits a lot harder in general, I believe. I think it has a wider variety of moves that you can expect it to be using. So yeah, I think Intimidate and Stakeout are both equally viable. Guard Dog is really good. Excuse me. Guard Dog is really good. However, because Mabostiff can't really set up super well. Maybe he can learn Howl. I could be wrong about that, but that's like the only move I could even fathom it being able to set up with. So if it had any other way of really setting up, then I could see more value in not being able to be forced out. But because it can't really set up in a way, I feel it doesn't synergize perfectly with that ability. I think that ability does work better on Okidogi, you know, um, where bulk up works really well with that Pokemon. So after you get a couple of bulk ups going, you're not going to want to switch it out. So not being forced out is very good. Um, so yeah, not to mention, Intimidate is prevalent, but it's not the only ability the opponents have. So if you're only running it in order to get that attack boost from Intimidate, it's not going to happen every single time. You would prefer to have something like Defiant, which would raise it every time any stack is lowered. So it's a good ability. Um, but yeah, I think number four is about right for this. Now for the top three. The top three were incredibly hard to parse out. But I think I'm happy with my placements, but please again let me know if you disagree with the placements here. So we have Basket Legion. I'm kind of surprised that they ended up both male and female having the same abilities. I kind of thought they would give them a different hit ability or something, but regardless, they both have Swift Swim, which once again doubles speed when rain is active, Adaptability, which boosts power of stab moves, and Mold Breaker, which ignores the target's ability when attacking. All three of these are absolutely incredible abilities. Swift Swim is really good in the current meta when weather wars are just all over the place now. On top of getting the speed your speed raised, you also are able to hit harder with your water moves in the rain. Adaptability would make those water moves hit harder as well, on top of your ghost moves hitting harder. And then Mold Breaker with stuff like Mega Dragonite out there with multi-scale. Um, with a lot of sturdy Pokemon around, with a Mimikyu's disguise ability, you can just hit through all those like they're nothing. I think all three of these are very, very good on it. The only problem with this is that I feel like even though Mold Breaker is a really, really good ability, I very rarely actually see people use it. I more so see people use Swift Swim and some adaptability, especially in more single battle settings. But yeah, so because the other two are definitely used a lot more than Mold Breaker, I'm gonna have to put it only at number three, but I could see a reality where all three are very viable. Now for number two, honestly, this Pokemon was number one for a while, but I a last minute kind of switched it around, but I still think it very much so in the running for number one. We have Scrafty. Now, Scrafty has Shed Skin, which has a one-third chance every turn of curing a status condition. So, sleep, burn, poison, etc. All of them have a one-third chance of being gone by the end of the turn. Pretty good. Moxie raises your attack when they feint an opponent. So every time you knock something out, your attack goes up. Amazing. And then intimidate, once again, very, very good. I've actually seen very valid sets for all of these. Um, Moxie is very good on Dragon Dance sets. You get one or two Dragon Dance boosts up, then you start attacking, and your attack game's going up, and you're able to just continually steamroll over everything. Shed Skin is better on bulk up sets where you want to get your defenses higher, but you'd rather not get burned or whittled down by toxic. So you get bulk ups up, and then if you rest, you actually have a pretty decent chance of waking up early. So that's very good. Obviously, once again, Intimidate is always very good to have intimidators around. So this so far, I believe, is the closest any any three abilities have had. Like the only argument I can see here is that Shed Skin isn't the most reliable. If it had a one half chance or just completely immune to status conditions, that'd be even better. But how it is right now, I still think 1/3 chance every turn is still very, very good. So yeah, like I said, Scrafty was very, very close to the top. Right after filming this, I could even change my mind and think that Scrafty should be number one. But I think my number one, I think I am confident in it in this moment, and that being Titan. So. So Titan has thick fat, which once again reduces fire and ice moves. I know it is obviously already resistant to ice, but it usually would take some effective damage from fire. So now it's basically not weak to that anymore. Slush Rush, which is just like Sand Rush and Swift Swim, where it doubles speed when snow is active, or hail in earlier gens, but as far as Titan goes, it's only snow. And then Sheer Force. So Titan is actually a very, very good user of sheer force. They can learn Icicle Crash, Play Rough, um, Liquidation. I think a couple like Iron Hand, like a bunch of different moves that are actually very good on it, where sheer force is incredibly viable. Thick Fat and Slush Rush are both very, very good on belly drum sets. You're going to want to have a better chance of getting that move off. So, taking less damage from a move you usually should be weak to would definitely help with that. And then Slush Rush, once you quadrupled your attack power, being faster will only help you. And then Sheer Force also helps your output there. Slush Rush, just in general, um, yeah, it's it's also one of those abilities where because of the way snow works, where it boosts the defense of ice types, you know, I think Titan works well in snow with or without Slush Rush. You know, like I said, because it boosts your defense, yes, it really does help to have that increased speed, but it also helps just keep you sustaining you in general with thick fat and allow you to do more with sheer force. So just overall, it synergizes with this Pokemon so well. I genuinely think that this is for me would be the hardest choice to make between these three abilities. It would definitely depend on the different team comp, but you know, I think there are various different move sets and different team compositions that could be made with each of these three abilities. So that's why I'm saying that the Titan has the single best set of abilities in all of Pokemon. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought about all the Pokemon that I talked about today. Like I said, if there are any Pokemon that you feel should have been on this list that weren't, please let me know down below. Are there any Pokemon in the honorable mentions that I kind of um, misjudged? They should have been higher, or then in the top five that you think should not have been there? Um, you know, Please let me know down below other Pokemon that you just, that have just really good abilities that you think I missed. Are there any Pokemon that you think have just, three really, really bad abilities? Because I very well might make another video where I talk about just the worst sets of abilities. I think that could be fun as well. So yeah, let me know all that down below. Like to have a discussion going. And with that, I'll see you all next time.